Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Megan Stringer, reporter for the Wichita Eagle. I write about labor, the workplace, and employment in the Wichita region. I've been covering stories about and for workers during the pandemic. Today, we'll be talking about the future of remote work, given its advent in the last year or so. We know people are wondering if this trend will really stick around. If it does, it could mean a massive shift for not only our work lives, but our personal lives. Especially if people are moving to different cities where they can work wherever they like. Today, we're joined by experts in Wichita who work directly with growing and retaining talent in the community. Alejo Cabral of W Young Professionals, Anne-Marie Coughlin of the Greater Wichita Partnership, and Andrea Hattan of The Hive. Alejo Cabral is the director of W, a community of young professionals at the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. He works to implement programs and initiatives to help retain and engage diverse talent in our community. Alejo is a first-generation American, the son of 2 immigrant parents, and was born and raised in Chula Vista, California, but is proud to call himself a Wichita, Kansas transplant. He also serves on the Board of Park Commissioners for the City of Wichita, among other local board positions. Anne-Marie Coughlin is the Executive Vice President of Talent for the Greater Wichita Partnership. She works with employers and community partners to retain and attract a talented workforce to the Wichita region. She focuses on building the workforce of the future and positioning Wichita as the top place to live, work, and play. Andrea Hattan is the founder and CEO of The Hive, a women-focused co-working space and online community that helps women by providing resources, connections, and positive support to grow and scale their businesses. Andrea has firsthand experience in building a brand in the community quickly, efficiently, and sustainably, and her favorite thing to do is help others do it too. Now, let's get started. This first question, Anne-Marie, we'll start with you. Before COVID-19 hit, some companies might have resisted allowing workers to permanently work remotely as a regular thing. So we all hear that remote work is sticking around, but the question is it really, or is it too soon to tell if this is going to stay relevant in a post-pandemic world? Anne-Marie? You're muted. We can't hear you yet.
Oh, I started already muted. Sorry about that. Yes, absolutely. There are still a ton of unknowns, and trying to predict the future in our crystal ball is going to be hard right now. But there's a lot of research out there, and if you look through articles from Forbes and Slack and Pew Research, there's anything from 50 to 80% of employees want to continue remote work, at least at a hybrid level. And I think with the way that technology is advancing in the workplace, we'll continue to see that, both as a benefit to employers and to employees going forward. So what it looks like exactly is a bit unknown, but I do think it's going to be part of a trend for a long time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Alejo, what about you? Do you think that remote work is here to stick around?
I'm not sure, like Anne-Marie said, it's a little difficult to say one way or the other, but I believe that, it's going to be a hybrid version, right? Some way or another, whether it's, 2 days in the office and 3 days out or vice versa. But for the foreseeable future, I imagine that, after connecting with a lot of my peers and our volunteers that engage with us, it's looking like it's going to be a diverse response to how individuals start getting back into the office. And so I imagine hybrid is going to be the way of the future for the next year or so, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. And Andrea, what are your thoughts? Is remote work going anywhere?
I think that remote work is always going to be around, and now that a lot of companies that had not really considered it as an option in the past have been forced to embrace it, that it's going to be on their employees to kind of, put their foot in the sand and kind of say, we're not going back 100% at least to in person. I think that there will be, as the panelists have mentioned, a hybrid approach. I do see a lot of people really missing that in-person connection and that camaraderie among a team, bouncing ideas off of one another, and the ability to, handle problems quickly. It's hard to do sometimes through email or Slack or other forms of communication to get those quick kind of pop-off questions answered that you need when you're working on a team. So I definitely think that there will always be some sort of in-person element to the companies that are able to have that. And to the companies that are able to go fully remotely, I do think that's an option that's going to stay around, and a lot of people are going to embrace it.
Yeah. And speaking of that, we know there are both pros and cons to remote work. So what do you see as a big benefit to workers when they can stay remote? What's in it for them? Anne-Marie?
Sure. Yeah. So on the pro side of things, there's quite a few benefits to remote work. There's the flexibility to work different hours. There's flexibility to work in different locations. At times, it can definitely be more productive when you're at home and not in the office with interruptions or last-minute meetings, and not having the commute is also a good benefit for everyone there. You've got technology at home. You can set yourself up for success and have your day go about it with a little bit more control maybe than you do in the office. But yeah, definitely some drawbacks as well too. But those are a couple of the pros to start off with.
Yeah. And Alejo, you work with young professionals. So what do you see as the benefit to young people in remote work?
Yeah, I think Anne-Marie touched on a couple of them, but one of the bigger benefits I think is going to be the opportunity for employers to be more flexible as it pertains to, everybody's work life has different levels of diversity to it as well. So you might be a new parent, right? Maybe your commute is a little further to work, and so it takes a little bit longer to get there. I think the ability to work remotely will offer employers an opportunity to recruit and really retain those individuals who maybe have some other challenges. Like if you have a young kid and you got to take them to school in the mornings, right? I mean, being able to work remotely, and whether it be hybrid or 100% remote, really does give. I think employers could really use this as an opportunity to grow that diverse workforce that, for so long we've been talking about. We want to retain and engage with more diverse talent. Well, remote work and hybrid work is really one of those avenues that can really allow us to do that in an effective way.
Yeah. And Andrea, what do your members of the Hive see as a benefit to remote work? What would be, what are they looking at as an upside to them?
Well, as a women-focused community, obviously we do have a lot of moms, and remote work really can be a game changer for moms. It allows them to have that flexibility to work those different hours. So, maybe not working 8 to 5, which is, hard with young kids, but maybe putting in a lot of those after hours works, after kids go to bed or before kids wake up in the morning. I know a lot of moms that are able to really do more than most people do in an 8 to 5 in those early morning hours and after kids go to bed hours. So it really does kind of open up that flexibility, and also just as mentioned, the commute and all of those things, but just being able to work in an environment that inspires you. So being a co-working space ourselves, I don't think working from home full-time 24/7 is a very healthy, mentally healthy idea, but I also don't think working from an office full-time all of the time is mentally healthy. I like to have variety of workplace environments. I mean, you've seen people love to do that. They like to pop into a coffee shop for an afternoon and work. Getting out of that environment kind of opens up new ideas, innovative thinking, and allows you to maybe do some different kinds of networking too than you might otherwise be able to do if you were locked into like an office job that you had to go to during traditional hours every day.
Yeah, really great points. And you're bringing this up a little bit too about some of the pros and the cons, right? So Andrea, we'll stay with you for this question, but what are some of the drawbacks, right, to being in your home all the time for work? It's a different environment.
Well, one of the reasons I started the Hive was because I had experienced as a teacher when I had summers off and over winter break, I would sink into a deep depression because I didn't have the structure and I didn't have the socialization. And it was hard for me to manage my schedule completely open and free like that. And so one of the reasons I started the Hive was when I transitioned to working remotely with my content strategy consulting business, I knew that I needed a mental health outlet, a way to be around other people who were doing inspiring things. And that energy that is built by a bunch of people working on their own passion projects or their own businesses in one space. So I think the downside would be, a lot of mental health issues potentially with people not being around others and in that energetic environment, and also just, the distractions with when there's no distinction between where you relax and where you work, it's very easy to get distracted by, the couch, the bed, the, different ways that you relax, but also the dishes, the laundry, the kids, the pets, the, different noises that are happening in the background. And so I think that managing all of that, you have to be very self-disciplined. And so that's one of the reasons that I promote that variety approach, having different days maybe that you're in different places and not always at home or always at work.
Yeah, absolutely. And Anne-Marie, what to you are the drawbacks? Are there things that you're hearing from employers that you're working with or the workers about what they're not as excited about with remote work?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of different things to consider. When you're not in the office together and in person, organizations have to be much more intentional around recognition and appreciation and engagement and involvement. It's one of the reasons that one of our 3 priority areas this year is around cultivating a talent-focused culture, because we all want to be connected to our organizations and recognized for our work. And to Andrea's point, I think also the lack of separation when your office is right outside of your kitchen and your living room and everything else, work and life blend a lot more together. So a bit of a challenge in separating there. And I think also there's a conversation around the growing disparities that we see with individuals who are working remotely and might not have access to high-speed internet or technology or a whole separate room to use as an office as well. So making sure that our organizations are connecting with individuals and asking them what they need and making sure that they're continuously creating that inclusive and equitable opportunity for career advancement as well too. So those are a couple of the bigger ones I would mention.
Yeah. And Alejo, the drawbacks for young professionals in some instances could be different than the drawbacks for other generations or people who might have families at home, that sort of thing. So what are you seeing in that realm that young professionals are excited about some things, but what are they maybe not as excited about?
No, thank you. Like I think our panelists covered several very important points about some of the drawbacks, especially the mental health piece. Oftentimes if you're working remote and you work in your own apartment, and during COVID we can't go work at a coffee shop or at a co-working space, that isolation can be damaging to a young professional's not just productivity but to their mental health. And so that's a major drawback. And then I think Anne-Marie mentioned it, access to high-speed internet. We assume that every young professional has access to Wi-Fi or hotspot, but that isn't always necessarily the case. And so it's important that as employers that we reach out often to those individuals to make sure that all of our employees and all of our team members have access to the resources that they need to be successful while they're working remotely. And so the intentionality piece is a big drawback. And then another piece that I think is a drawback that may get overlooked often is those serendipitous ideas that might come when you're having a conversation with your coworker in the hallway, right? Or that ability to partner or reach out to a colleague or a coworker in another department to be innovative and bring new projects and programs to life. It's difficult to have those spontaneous conversations and those spontaneous relationships when we're all working from a computer at home as opposed to working in the same location. And so the biggest things, I think the biggest thing is the mental health piece and the access to high-speed internet. Are 2 major drawbacks to working remotely.
Yeah. So considering all these pros and cons, and considering that even at least in a hybrid form, remote work, will be around for a little bit. And Alejo, we'll stay with you for this question, but do you think that permanent remote work could have the potential to draw new employees to the Wichita region? So could we see people who want to, say, live in Wichita but work for a company headquartered elsewhere?
I think that remote work will allow us to retain a lot of talent who maybe thought about leaving our community. So You might be a young professional whose next step, maybe the next step in your career is at an organization that isn't based out of Wichita. And with a lot of employers embracing this remote work, this is a way for us to keep that person here in this community, engaged with our city, with various organizations and various communities and various spaces. And so the retention piece is something that really excites me about this, as it pertains to attracting talent from other communities to move to Wichita. I think will be a little bit more challenging, mostly because that is oftentimes based on people's perceptions of our community. And so they may, somebody from California or New York or Texas that's looking to work remotely, but live somewhere a little bit less expensive, I should say, is, they might have preconceived ideas or notions of our community that aren't true. And so I think it's up to us to help bring light to the beautiful things and the wonderful things that are happening in our city. But I don't know how many young professionals we'll be attracting to Wichita. You see other neighboring communities like Tulsa and Northwest Arkansas that are offering to pay young professionals $10,000 a year to move and work remotely. And there's been a lot of success with those initiatives in those communities. But, I don't know that we'll be able to attract new young professionals to our city without doing some sort of incentive like that. Granted, that's not. I don't know what that looks like and how we get there. I think that'll require a lot of collaboration. But permanent remote work, I think, allows us to retain talent here in this community as opposed to seeing them leave to other places.
Yeah, and you make a really good point between the difference in retaining workers that we have versus attracting workers from out of town or elsewhere. So Anne-Marie, I'd like to throw that question to you as well. You work in attraction and retention both. Do you see a difference in potential of, keeping employees here versus bringing them in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of talking points around this, and I'll start with at the Greater Wichita Partnership, our 3 priority areas are quality of place, job growth, and talent attraction and retention, because we know that all 3 of those areas are intertwined. And if we want to continuously attract new talent to Wichita, we definitely want to have that focus on the quality of place and quality of life, and making sure that we are marketing our region as a top place to live, work, and play. So for us, in 2019, we launched the ChooseWichita.com website and the Choose Wichita brand, so that we could set our region up to change some of those perceptions like Alejo was talking about, and making sure that external talent is aware of the lifestyle they can have here. And also it's an opportunity if we can attract remote workers here, opportunities to engage them in the community, so that it's not just a temporary stop for them, but that they want to make this a long-term home for them. And part of that retention will be having other job opportunities in the future. So again, tying those 3 areas together, I think at the partnership, we set ourselves up well with having that strong foundation, and now we'll be looking at how do we attract that talent and retain our talent going forward, with a bit of a different lens through COVID. And on the retention piece, I would say, in 2020, we saw, tens of thousands of local workers here impacted by unemployment. And that was a priority for us last year, was to use the Get Trained, Get Paid campaign to connect those local workers to career and educational opportunities. And that will definitely be a big part of the retention piece going forward, for all those individuals impacted, as well as attracting and retaining remote workers as well, and growing our talent pool for future opportunities here as well too.
Yeah. And Andrea, you work with your members at the Hive who are weighing some of these options, right? About, what's a good place to make these connections or start their business. What are you hearing from members, or what are you seeing that it takes for people to want to stay in Wichita and start their business, or go somewhere else?
First of all, I think Alejo and Anne-Marie made some really great points about that distinction between retention and attraction. I would say that honestly, in COVID, we've seen an influx of young women in particular moving back home. So people that are from Wichita that now work in New York and LA and Atlanta and these other bigger cities, even for bigger companies. And they've been able to work remotely, come back home because those bigger cities are mostly shut down right now. Stay with parents for a little while and have come into the Hive so they get that high-speed internet, so they can get that sense of community, so they can get that professionalism to maintain their personal brand and within their career role and all of that. But the goal has been then, I think, to keep them here, right? So I always tell them, I'm going to secretly try to keep you in Wichita. And they're like, I'm not staying here. It's just a pit stop, right? It's just a necessary thing bump in my career in the midst of a pandemic. But I'm a boomeranger myself. I was born and raised in Goddard and here in Wichita and moved away and came home after having my daughter to be closer to family. So I think that when it comes to attraction, in a way, it's actually still retention. It's retention of people that have some sort of roots here. So they might, they're boomerangers and we need to get them to come back because as they start to see, okay, these bigger cities, our cost of living is so high, these bigger cities, who knows how long we're going to be in this type of situation with the pandemic. And also when they start to have families and want to settle down, they all start seeing Wichita as, okay, that makes more sense, why I'd want to be in Wichita. So it's almost like attracting back people that have left. And when there was an article in 2007 when I was graduating high school in the Wichita Eagle called The Great Wichita Brain Drain. And I wrote this letter to the editor about why I was leaving Wichita, why all my friends were leaving Wichita. And it was because there was nothing for people in that age group to do, from the age group of really like 13 to 20, right? We've got kind of the bar scene and all that. And there's a lot for younger families to do, but they were kind of missing out on that younger age demographic. Like those are the people who are making decisions about whether they want to stay in Wichita or not. And they're going off to college or, getting their first job somewhere else. They just want to get out of here. And so I think we've done a lot to change the perception of how people feel about Wichita, but there's still lots of work to do. But I don't think that it's totally impossible to be attracting people, but I think we're going to have better luck focusing on attracting people back here rather than on people who don't have a connection to Wichita at all. Somebody that's from LA that doesn't have any family or friends here, like why would they move here rather than, like you said, Tulsa or Oklahoma City or some of these Omaha, some of these cities that are having these incentives that still have lower cost of living and all of that. But I think, if we can kind of attract people back would be a good thing to focus on.
Yeah, you've all made great points about retaining some of those workers, attracting people back. Yeah. So this is in that vein related, and Anne-Marie, I'll pose this to you to start. If someone can work wherever they want, what would draw a person to live somewhere? So even if I have family in Wichita, we talk about quality of life. It's one thing when it makes sense to be near a family, but what are some of those quality of life things that people in this demographic would look for? What might convince them to stay? Is it about the arts? Is it about a vibrant downtown? Is it about politics? Is it about, any number of things that might convince someone to stay?
I think the short answer is yes to all of those, depending on the person and their priorities and their values. But, I think for us here, at least at the partnership, because we have that focus on quality of place, and we know that in order for cities and regions to be successful, that we need to have that thriving downtown, that central location that pulls the city together, that brings people together in the community. And especially while we're still in the pandemic, just the public spaces, the outdoor space, the ways that we can still get out of the house and be social, but be safe and socially distanced. All the public spaces are going to be really important. And, and that's why our downtown Wichita is focused on building up that thriving downtown region and around placemaking and programming so that all of our local community as well as external talent can also see what we have going on, places they can be a part of, ways that they can still engage in the community. And then, through the marketing, we're helping to share that message to external talent as well too, just to make sure that everyone knows that they can be a part of this community here. So what will draw anyone to any region, I think, is going to be pretty personalized, but we do know that, generally speaking, everybody wants to have a good quality of life, live in a place they can afford, and nowadays especially, maybe wanting to have that extra room that you can work from home or space out a little bit instead of having 6 roommates in your home with you. So the cost of living will be big, the placemaking, outdoor space for us. And I think just being part of a community and a city that's continuing to invest in itself and to grow, and that kind of takes a look at itself in the lens of 2020 and moves forward. Especially I go back to just the ability to have a community where you feel included and that you feel welcome, and that you can be a part of it.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Alejo, in your work with young professionals, what do you see that young professionals in particular are looking for in a place to stay? Is that different than other demographics or groups of professionals?
No, I think Anne-Marie touched on some really great points and some things that they're, obviously you want a strong core, a strong downtown, and there's parks, right? And the walkability and the quality of place and cost of living. And I think all of those things are very important. But one of the things I think that often gets overlooked is, I think young people want to live, especially diverse talent wants to live in communities where they see themselves reflected in their city. And so one of the things that young professionals, I think, look for are diverse communities that are growing and that are thriving, that do make them feel welcome. And so, you look at some of the cities that are growing quite rapidly, and they've embraced those diversity aspects of their community, and they use them as a part of, their identity, right? You look at the San Antonios of the world, the Philadelphias of the world, the Los Angeles of the world. These cities and these communities have embraced those diversity aspects of themselves, and it's a part of their identity. And young professionals look to those communities because they feel welcome and they see themselves in their community. And so, I think that young professionals, as they look at other communities where when they're possibly looking to leave our city, they look at other cities that are perceived to be more diverse, though Wichita is a very diverse community to begin with. And so, as a community, and really as an organization, W and the Chamber are working tirelessly to help transform our community to be a more inclusive space, right? To be a more equitable space. And you see that through a lot of the work being done, specifically at the Chamber, through the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives being led by Jonathan Long. And so those initiatives, I think, are going to be the things that help transform Wichita into the space where, instead of young professionals looking to leave our city, start saying, okay, I can see myself being here because there's other people who look like me. Yes, I can get a low quality. I have a high quality of life here, right? Rent is cheap, traffic's non-existent. But there's also people who look like me who are in leadership roles, right? And there's people who look like me that are affecting change in our community. And there's different avenues and different spaces like the Hive, right, where I can go and feel welcomed and engaged. And so that diversity aspect, that inclusion aspect, and the equity piece are all, I think, very important and critical as we look to retain talent, and as young people look to move to other cities, they look for those things.
Yeah, great point. Thank you. So I want to jump to a reader question that we have now, and it's related in this as well. This is a question from a reader named Dennis. And Dennis wants to know how permanent remote work could potentially actually work against us and hurt downtown development. So if we have less office space being used downtown, fewer downtown workers eating or shopping downtown, that could have potentially a negative impact on downtown at the same time that we're talking about the importance of building up that vibrancy to attract some of these workers. So Anne-Marie, we'll start with you for this one.
Sure. I go back to, there's just so many unknowns, and predicting the exact impact on our downtown would be really hard right now. But I think that even if we do see a change in the office space that's being used, even if we do see remote work as a long-term opportunity for companies and for remote workers. I think we're still going to see so much opportunity in our downtown, in just opportunities for people to connect with one another. I think it was Andrea earlier said that we miss being together. We miss being in groups and collaborating with one another. So no matter what, we're still going to have a big emphasis on building up that strong urban core for our city to be successful.
Yeah. And Andrea, you have your co-working space downtown, right? So could you, when you're looking at this shift that could hurt downtown versus what we need to help downtown, do you think that you could see a shift like that happening and people are leaving downtown? And what would, someone like you with office space downtown look for?
So I think that we're going to see more of a future of companies investing in employees, in their mental health, in their professional development, and maybe even in their independent office spaces, right? So something that I've been seeing is during the pandemic over the last year, people have kind of slipped into maybe a little bit of an unprofessional way that they're showing up. So like, okay, we're all living in real life right now. There's kids running around and screaming in the background. There's like dishes and laundry, and the background of your Zoom calls is kind of messy and your lighting's not great. And people were willing to kind of give you a free pass, right? Because we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're all just dealing with it. But now that we're a year into it, I think that people are kind of starting to come back to that. Okay, I need to bring a professional feel back to this, and I need to level up my branding. And so we have several members whose companies pay for their membership. So rather than, paying for their own office space for their entire company, they're kind of disbanding out to everybody's houses, but then they want to make sure that their employees are still able to show up professionally. And so they might pay for a 1 day a week membership or for a private office membership here. And there's so many great co-working spaces around town, regardless of where people live or what kind of vibe or environment you're looking for. I think more and more there's going to be a move towards companies investing in that kind of thing, and employees, valuing themselves enough to say like, hey, working from home has been working really well for me, and I know it saves you a lot of money in these ways. So can we reinvest some of that money in making sure that I have a professional space once a week to go to record my videos, or to do my Zoom calls, or to have my client meetings? So we're doing that in more of a professional way. And so I think that move back towards like having a professional presentation is going to necessitate, people kind of moving back into the downtown space, into whatever office spaces are available, because there's so many different kinds and types. That's what I would like to see, and what I am starting to see. It's just it's a mindset shift. It's a different kind of expense than companies are used to. And it's also the solopreneurs and entrepreneurs also are seeing that too. Like, okay, I could invest all of this money in building an at-home studio to make sure that I look great on camera for all these Zoom calls and things. Or I could invest in an office space downtown and have that there, So I think people are just kind of having to shift their thinking a little bit.
Yeah, great point. So we have another question from a reader named Jane. And Jane would like to know what quality of life features that the city and county could provide to attract some of this young and creative talent, or retain them. And depending on what some of those features are, how do we think about paying for those, and what's realistic? Anne-Marie, we'll start with you.
Great. And, I would say if our focus is on, the young talent, how we attract them, I might even kick it over to Alejo as well, because I know he has such a great pulse on that population for us. There's a lot of different ways we can attract talent and engage our talent with different quality of life and placemaking opportunities. And I think that's a great conversation for our community our community to have with our city and our county as well. And another one that I would even encourage a follow-up conversation with our downtown team, as they're the ones that are working with our city and our county and our business leaders, and everyone that represents downtown and what they're building out here. But I think just generally speaking, I would go back to it's going to be personalized based on someone's values and what they want to get out of the placemaking, but just continuously focusing on that centralized downtown urban core that's going to bring people together, and that has that inclusivity for everyone, so that no matter what your values are and what you want to get out of it, there's different opportunities, and just ensuring that it's accessible for everyone as well too will be a priority to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to engage with what we're building out.
Yeah. And Alejo, I'll throw it over to you then. As you work with this young and creative talent that Jane is wondering kind of how we attract and how do we make that, a realistic and permanent thing that we can afford, whether it's through the city or private organizations.
Sure. Yeah, I think, I think Anne-Marie made a really great point that this is a conversation, this is a topic that, we should be have a dialogue about this with our community as a whole, right? And it should be a lot broader. But, when we look at quality of place things, you look at designing a community around people versus vehicles, right? And so our friends at the partnership already and downtown Wichita and the chamber as well are all working on some of these issues, whether it be through designing a downtown that's walkable, right? Reimagining our riverfront so that we can have more green space. You look at the success of something like the pop-up park, right? And granted, we're all sad that it's gone, but it was always meant to be temporary. But you look at this space that was an empty lot for a long time, and what was able to become of it was a central gathering community, a central gathering place for our community. And it wasn't more than tables and chairs and spaces for a few food trucks to pop up, right? So we see this space that was nothing. It was a big hole in the ground, and it became this gathering space for our community, right? When you look at that concept and we say, all right, can we reimagine that and include spaces like that throughout our community, right? We're reimagining, our roads in downtown and trying to make sure that people are able to walk to work if they want to, or ride a bike to work, or public transit. It's important to have those things downtown, but if we want to make sure that everybody in our community feels welcome, can we be intentional about those things and make sure that that bike lane doesn't end at Kellogg, right? Can we make sure that that bike lane extends all the way down through South Wichita, right? Can we make sure that it extends all the way north to Nomar, right? We need to make sure that these areas, these different experiences that we're putting in our core, that they're also put in place equitably throughout our community, so that if you work downtown, you can ride to Nomar, right? To experience the awesome food down there, right? Or you can ride your bike down south to OJ Watson and experience that beautiful park. We need to make sure that as we invest in quality of place initiatives, that they're dispersed equitably throughout our community. And also we need to look at continuing to expand our green space. I mean, obviously I'm biased. I serve on the park board commissioners, and I love all of our parks, 140 plus of them. But we can do more to make sure that those parks, that people have access to them, right? Because you look at some of these communities where young people have moved. I mean, and public transit is a huge thing, right? Being able to walk and ride your bike to work is a big thing. And so, young people want to be able to do those things, right? Not everybody necessarily wants to ride a vehicle to drive a car to work, right? Maybe they want to ride a bike or a scooter or whatever it may be. So I think investing in those in public transit, right? Investing in these things, but doing it in an equitable fashion is going to be essential to the retention of talent. How we pay for it, I don't know. I mean, I think that's a matter of aligning our priorities as a community, right? And if retaining talent is something that our city and our county are adamant in investing in, then you invest in the things that matter. And if these things if these are things that young people have said matter to them, then it's up to our elected officials to budget for these items. And our young professionals and our community as a whole should be communicating with our elected officials on a regular basis anyways. But if this is something that you are passionate about, I mean, you have the opportunity to engage in dialogue with our elected officials at any point. So I would encourage anybody to do that.
Yeah, thank you. And bringing up this conversation too about some of these solutions, whether it's public transit, whether it's diversity inclusion, solutions to how we can retain these workers, how we can keep them here. Andrea, in your mind, what are some realistic solutions, things that can be done, right here in Wichita to start getting going on these initiatives?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. One of the things I think about is when people come here, they want interesting things to do, interesting restaurants to eat at, interesting places to shop. And these are all businesses, right? Small businesses. And I see a lot of people start businesses that everybody's really passionate about and excited about in the beginning. And everybody in Wichita is always behind new businesses when they start. And there's a lot of fanfare. But then business owners tend to kind of be like left alone after the fanfare leaves, and you need like sustained interest and sustained commitment from customers and from the community and from the city and from our government in these small businesses in order to keep these cool things in Wichita. Like we want to keep these cool concepts, like Little Lion or like the Plant Shop or like, small little bookstores or just breweries and different things like that. If we want to keep the interesting businesses, co-working spaces, these interesting businesses in our town, we've got to find a way to make sure that people are patroning them, because that's kind of the thing I see a lot is we get these dreamers, we get these people who take a chance and come here and start a business. And I don't know what the answer is, but we need to keep these businesses alive because they are the heartbeat of our city. If we have businesses closing down on Douglas, not being able to stay in business, then that's taking the heartbeat out of, we're wanting people to walk and travel along Douglas and be a part of that community. We got to keep these businesses alive, not just there, but all over our city, for people to be patroning and be a part of and build that sense of community. And I think Wichita does kind of have a problem with like showing up consistently over time for the things that they say that they want. We say that we want these things, so we've got to make sure that we keep them alive.
Yeah. And in this remote work movement and making sure that we're being equitable and behind all of these small business owners, there are other people who maybe can't work remotely, or maybe they have the ability to work remotely, but they feel like they don't, or there's something that's keeping them, maybe they're a small business owner without broadband, as we've talked about. There's something that's keeping them from fully being a part of this movement. So Anne-Marie, I'd like to start with you for this question, but who do you think, does get left behind? And in your work, is it different in working across different demographics of workers, across age, across industries, that sort of thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we talk about remote workers and what that population wants, we're definitely talking about a subset of everyone that's in the workforce right now. Anything from small business owners or surgeons or police officers or advanced manufacturing professionals. There's definitely a large population here that is not able to do work remotely, and maybe they're choosing not to, or they have limitations in that. So there's absolutely a subset that we're talking about with remote work. And if you were kind of asking how we focus on this attraction and retention across the different demographics, I think there's a consistent message across to all of our talent. And to Andrea's point, we want to get that message out there that Wichita does have really amazing places in our community, and that we are a group of people who take chances and who create new things. And we want to keep that really independent, innovative spirit alive here and share that message with our talent as well. And a couple parts that we're focusing on here from a retention and attraction piece is really focused on continuously building up our talent here as well. So making sure that all of our talent has access to upskilling, reskilling, and educational opportunities, because the world of work will continue to change and evolve because of technology. So the more that we can help to advance the careers of our talent, the more they're going to want to stay here, and the more they're going to want to be a part of the organizations that are investing in them from a skill set perspective. But then also, again, going back to that, cultivating a talent-focused culture, and that's ensuring that our local organizations know the trends that are going forward out of 2020 around recognition programs and remote working and benefits, and how is all of that changing. So making sure that we're connecting our talent and our organizations to those trends to make sure that our talent wants to stay here and wants to continuously be a part of the companies that we have here. And then they see that quality of life, like we were saying, that they can engage with the community, they can engage with our city council members and be a part of different boards, and just find a way for them to, or help them find their way to connect to our community in a way that connects with their values as well. So yeah, lots of opportunities there.
Yeah. And Alejo, in your work with young professionals, when we're talking about who's left out, are there workers who get left out of that professional definition or in different demographics or industries, and how do you think in your work about including their needs as well?
No, thank you. Great question. I think, Andrea made a good point that, there's a lot of different professions that don't necessarily have the ability to work remotely. Oftentimes it's frontline workers or essential workers, whether it's somebody at a grocery store, working at a restaurant or something of that nature, right? And unfortunately, oftentimes the majority of those individuals are people of color. They're Black, Latino, Asian, and unfortunately, because of those things, COVID-19 might be affecting, it does affect them at a far higher rate than other populations. And so, I think it's important that, we identify and we spell out that, it's a lot of our diverse workers who are being affected the most by this, because unfortunately they don't necessarily have the opportunity to work remotely. In addition to that, you look at other professions like, being an artist, right? That's or an entrepreneur, a small business owner. These professions, oftentimes you're not able to work remotely. And so, as we look forward to, whether it's working remotely, working hybrid, we just need to be very intentional about where we dedicate our resources as a community, because I have the ability, for example, to work remotely, right? And I'm very privileged for that opportunity. Other colleagues of mine don't necessarily have those opportunities, and so it's important that as a community, when we're putting our resources, towards the individuals who have the biggest needs. And so identifying those professions that maybe have gotten overlooked and haven't been considered is going to be really important as we move forward throughout this process. And as we move forward throughout our community, we need to make sure that whether you're a young professional or not, if you don't have those abilities to work remotely and you have to go to work every day, that you have access to a safe work environment, regardless of where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andrea, I know we've talked about this before as well, about people who might be left out of the permanent work from home movement, and how you can make sure to include them. What are your thoughts on that?
One of the things I think that is so great about Wichita is that it is a place where you can actually be a part of the community in a very actionable way, because we are a small, big city. If you want to sit on a board or a commission, or you want to be a part of local government or something like that, I think those are opportunities even for people who maybe are outside of this working remote conversation that we're having. I just encourage people to get more involved in leadership roles within the community, because I think that really is open to everyone. And this is a place unlike any other. If you live in a big city, it's, I'm 32 years old. I sit on several boards, several advisory committees and things like that wouldn't be possible probably if I were living in a much, much bigger city. I would just get lost in the sea of people. And so I think that we really have an opportunity in Wichita to really, be a place where we talk about diversity and inclusion, where our leadership, is 50% women, and whatever percentage or demographic of our city is of minorities. Like, I would love to see Wichita be a place where we are equally represented in our leadership roles, in our local government and on our boards and commissions and within our nonprofit community and all of that. I really do think that's an opportunity for people, regardless of where they fall into this discussion of whether they can take part in remote or any of that. It's a way to, if we focus a little bit more on that, probably too, to attract and retain talent from all areas, because it's a place where you can actually be a part of the conversation. And I love that about Wichita.
Yeah, certainly. We have a related question from a reader in this vein, a reader named Sherry, who's a director for a senior employment program in Wichita. And Sherry wants to know how employers can help accommodate older workers in the remote world who might prefer face-to-face interactions or not be as comfortable with technology. Anne-Marie, I'll throw this one to you.
Sure. I think with this, it's really individualized. And again, I go back to that idea of organizations being talent focused. And that means intentionally reaching out to your employees and asking what they need and how your organization can support them in transitioning into a remote position. Or if you're an organization that is offering a hybrid model and some people want to be in the office versus others wanting to be at home, making sure that you're giving all of those options equally to your employees across the board. But again, because we've been separated and because we might not be in that face-to-face interactions all the time, being intentional, reaching out, having those conversations, checking in with your employees. It's the transfer of technology or the impact of technology in the way that all of us work was a pretty big shock for, I think, everyone in every generation. So as an employer, I'd say reaching out, connecting with your employees individually and making sure that you are there to support them in whatever education or tech experience that they might need in order to be successful. And if that face-to-face interaction is really important to them, making sure that we take some extra steps to make those opportunities happen, even if it is Zoom face-to-face versus physically face-to-face, and making sure that employee feels appreciated and recognized and heard in what their needs are.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I want to wrap up with a question here because I know that remote work has impacted all of us working in our jobs too. So I want to hear a little bit from each of you about how it's been going for you, if you have any tips or things that have helped you personally adjust to remote work, whether you're doing it hybrid or you're not doing it anymore, or you're still doing it, whatever your situation might be. Alejo, I think the Young Professionals has done some virtual events, some stuff like that. We'll start with you.
Thank you. I'm going to be super honest. Remote work has been so difficult for me because I'm a very much extrovert. I love being around people. I love working with people. I just like being in the presence of people, and that's where I get my energy from. And so, the first couple months of having to work from home, I love my dog, but she's not a great coworker. So it was challenging, but for me, this ability to work hybrid has been really valuable because I have the opportunity to go into the chamber, into the office, and see my coworkers and colleagues. And granted, we're not necessarily meeting in our conference rooms and brainstorming together about new initiatives and projects, but just being able to see individuals and see other people and see my coworkers has been very valuable, very valuable. But the other piece, part of our job, part of our responsibilities at W is bringing young people together. And so it's been a challenge from our end, because you can't necessarily get the same engagement virtually, I don't believe, virtually as you would in person. And so our volunteers and our board have been challenged to come up with new ways of engaging our membership. And I think they've done an exceptional job. And so I applaud them for continuing to volunteer and be a part of W, while also working remotely, because they pour themselves into this organization, and we wouldn't be where we are today without our volunteers. And so I got to thank them and our board. But being able to work hybrid for me has been a blessing. And so I don't know. I think just being able to see other people is good. And that's why truth be told, I don't know that working remotely 100% would be the thing for me. So this hybrid deal, I love it. I just love being able to see people and engage with individuals once again. And I applaud the Eagle for bringing us together today. And thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And Andrea, what about you? How has your remote work been going? Do you have any tips or advice that you would share with anyone?
Oh gosh, ours has been a journey. Obviously, I own a co-working space, so that was a bit of a shift in the beginning of the pandemic. But thankfully, we're also a community, an online community and membership platform. And we'd already been live streaming all of our events since the very beginning, so that wasn't too much of a shift. We just turned off the in-person portion, and we've had to pivot a bunch. I've had to run like an online academy to supplement. I've had to do some more consulting, that kind of thing. I did have my daughter sent home from March until May. I made the decision to send her back to, she was in kindergarten, or she was in a preschool program. And then I decided to send her back to daycare for the summer. And then when school went, in person in August, and then fully remote again in October, and then back in person in January. One of the decisions I made was to invest in my business and my career by paying for daycare. And I was lucky to have that opportunity. I know a lot of other cities, daycares weren't even open at all, and or it was hard to find a spot for your kid and all of that. And some people financially, that's not something they're prepared for. I mean, here we were in kindergarten, supposedly not having to pay for daycare anymore, and then now having to pay for it again. People with older kids don't necessarily have that option. And so for me as a mom, as a single mom, that was probably my biggest mind challenge, is to kind of get around okay, this is just something that I have to do, that I have to invest in to make sure that I can continue to maintain my focus and all of that. We had our members really stuck with us in the beginning. We didn't have anybody cancel, I think the month of March and April. And then they kind of started to come through as things hit people financially. And we lost almost 100% of our private office members that were moms when school went remote in October. And then people are starting to come back now in the new year. I think people are really wanting to have that in-person community, and they're really trying to level up in their businesses and in their professional roles. And so we're starting to see things come back. We're still not open for in-person events yet, but we've really ramped up our online stuff. We're doing business coaching online now within our community. And we have, an investment club and some other masterminds and things that we've launched throughout the pandemic. That's been a fun pivot for us. But I'm like Alejo, I like the in-person interaction. And so I'm definitely ready to be back to that once some more people get vaccines. And I do appreciate you guys hosting this conversation. I think we are definitely in for a shift, and more people are honestly going to understand my industry than have ever understood it before, because now almost everybody that could experience remote work has experienced remote work, and they kind of know some of the pitfalls of working from home, some of the positives and the pitfalls. So my advice, if you can afford daycare or have grandparents that will help, please set aside some hours that you can work focused if you're a parent. And then my other thing would be to still find a place to get out of the house, even if it's just once a week. And we offer those memberships and other spaces around town to find the right fit for you. Alejo, you don't have to work with just your dog. You can put on a mask and come in and socially distance yourself somewhere at a space like ours. And so I would encourage people to kind of still get out of the house at least once a week, mental health wise.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And Anne-Marie, last but not least, what about you? What tips or advice would you have for anyone, dealing with some of these challenges in remote work?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I moved to Wichita from Denver in January of 2020. So just like Alejo, I took this role because I was really excited to be out in the community and connecting with individuals. And 2 months after moving to a new city and a new job, we went into a pandemic. So lots of lessons learned in this last year. But I would say that, at least for the partnership, what's been great this year is that we were able to still drive our priorities forward. I mean, the whole point of the partnership is to really align our community and to fast forward the economic growth. And so for us, we were able to shift that into a lot of virtual opportunities or helping with the COVID-19 task force and still being able to feel that fulfillment in our roles and find ways to connect and to drive our community forward. So being able to do that in your role and still connecting back to the priorities that you have, even if they've shifted, even if things have paused or they just feel different. I think that's a hugely important part of still feeling really connected to the mission of your role in your organization. And kind of to Andrea's point, I would say find ways to recharge and to refill your cup, because when you don't have that separation, when everything is just harder than it used to be, and there's just a lot going on right now, finding ways that will help to recharge those batteries is going to be essential to keeping that mental health and making sure that you're taking care of yourself, no matter what role you're in.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Anne-Marie. So those are all our questions. Thank you to Alejo, Anne-Marie, and Andrea for joining us this afternoon to discuss the impact of remote work. And thanks to our readers for your great questions. I know the conversation won't end here. You can keep up with the Eagle's reporting on work-related stories online at kansas.com. And be sure to find us on social media too. The Eagle's account is @kansas.com, and I'm on Twitter @megstringers. If you appreciate this kind of work, you can subscribe to the Wichita Eagle at kansas.com/subscribe. I'm Megan Stringer, workplace reporter for the Wichita Eagle. Have a great rest of your day, everyone, and thanks for watching.